Hey everybody, this is Death by D4, and welcome to my guide on how to create villains for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. There's a lot to go over, so be sure to subscribe and let's dive right on in. When creating a villain for yourself, the first thing that you should do is base your villain's general premise around an established archetype. That way you'll have a pretty good idea how they're supposed to act as you go around putting their narrative together. That said, there are many villain archetypes for you to consider, making this a bit more of a daunting task if you have absolutely no idea of where to start. However, if you ask me, all Dungeons & Dragons villains can be easily boiled down to one of 4 archetypes, and they're what I call the frontline villains, backline villains, sideline villains, and endline villains. A frontline villain is a proactive antagonist whose entire purpose is to directly challenge the players. Just think of them as your big old brutes. In a sense, they're the types of villains that act on their own accord, and whose actions will bring them into direct conflict with the players. A backline villain is a proactive antagonist whose entire purpose is to indirectly challenge your players. Just think of them as your devious masterminds. In a sense, they're the type of villain that gets others to do their dirty work for them, and whose actions will bring them in direct conflict with the players. A sideline villain is a reactive antagonist whose purpose is to directly challenge your players. Just think of them as your slumbering dragons. In a sense, they're the type of villains that act on their own accord, but won't actively engage with your players until they've chosen to challenge them. And finally, for our last villain archetype, an endline villain is a reactive antagonist whose purpose is to indirectly challenge your players. Just think of them as your otherworldly entities. In a sense, they're the type of villain that gets others to do their dirty work for them, but won't actively engage with your players until they've chosen to challenge them. And that's it! By picking one of these 4 archetypes, you'll be right on your way to creating a great campaign villain for yourself. However, now that you have, it's about time that we tackle that last important factor, narrative. So when it comes to establishing your villain's narrative, it should go without saying that there's really nothing stopping you from just doing this however you see fit, as there's almost no limit on the amount of work and detail that you can invest into creating your villain. However, in the interest of being as brief and concise as possible, I'm just going to boil it all down into 2 easy questions for you to answer. What are they doing? And why are they doing it? In terms of what your villain is doing, it should be anything that you know that will bring your players into conflict with them. After all, if your players don't end up conflicting with your villain's agenda, then they're really not much of a villain now, are they? And finally, in terms of your villain's motivation, just go to town with this, as it can be quite literally anything that you can think of. After all, any character of any type can have almost any reason for doing anything whatsoever, even if the nature of their goals and their motivations are in conflict with each other. In fact, many dungeon masters like to create villains with completely humanized motivations, allowing them to become more relatable to their players as they begin to learn more about them. That said, as fun as this concept is, just remember that you don't necessarily want to make your players feel bad for defeating your villain, as such a moment should still be something worth celebrating over at the table. As such, don't be afraid of just creating a villain who is just simply evil for the sake of being evil, as players will often relish in the chance to put any despicable villain down when given the chance to. Alright, that covers everything for creating a campaign villain. Now let's just go over a few examples. Urgrok the Barbaric, a frontline villain, is a hulking, terrible orc warlord whose primary goal is to kill the reigning monarch and plunge the land into anarchy. He aims to do this with his sheer unrelenting strength, and is motivated by a deep-seated need for revenge against the monarchy, whose knights were responsible for the death of his tribe. Salraz of the Flames Court, a backline villain, is a cruel and conniving archdevil, whose primary goal is to amass a myriad of souls for his dark master. With the help of his army of devils, he aims to do this by finding a long-lost artifact hidden deep away within the mortal plane, one capable of entrapping the souls of those who died nearby it. And he's motivated by a promise given to him by his Dark Master, a promise of luxury and the assertion of even greater power over other devils. Althea Heavenshard, a sideline villain, is a cold and callous vampire noble, whose primary goal is to maintain control over her township. She aims to do this by stamping out all attempts of resistance, and she's motivated by her innate vampiric hunger, once satiated by the blood of her fear-ridden townsfolk. And finally, Galmuth, an endline villain, is an ancient primordial god whose primary goal is to destroy all life as we know it. With the help of his brainwashed servants, it aims to do this by obtaining 9 celestial keys that will release it from its otherworldly prison. And it's motivated by an unearthly primal insanity, one that can only be quelled by bringing an end to all life in the universe. And that's it. If you liked the video, then be sure to subscribe and let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if you'd like to have the chance to play D&D with me, then feel free to join my Discord server. And consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see all of you in the next video.